Welcome to the Jill on Money podcast. It's Sunday, October 4th, and this is the second part of our interview with my friend, Jeff Bakalar. We recorded this interview in the very beginning of March, and so some of the stuff may sound a little bit maybe underestimating the impact of the virus. But in this part of the interview, we talk about all the different media companies, whether or not podcasting's in a bubble, and what's going on in the video and gaming industry. Here's the rest of our interview with CNET's Jeff Bakalar. You're very immersed in the world of media. What do you see as the landscape of, going forward? Like Netflix is now borrowing a ton of money to create content. Hulu's the NBC Peacock thing. Disney Plus came out like gangbusters. Amazon's sort of trying. Apple's sort of in it. What happens here?
I don't know what happens here.
You're my expert.
But I used to think there was going to be this massive content bubble that all of these, and to some degree, Netflix kind of walked a few things back in their spending. And, I guess for a time there was anything was getting greenlit. It was oh, what's that? You
Jeff and Jill want to do a talk show live? Let's do it.
Let's buy 8 episodes, right? So I think that's walked back a little bit. But there does not seem to be a shortage of the need for premium content, right? There doesn't seem to be this sort of dearth of the desire to keep having that, which I find kind of interesting and fascinating, that it's still a very lucrative thing for a lot of, streaming companies and media companies. I don't know what will happen. There is obviously this massive consolidation that's happening where you have all these acquisitions and mergers. Maybe things will regress to how things were when TV started becoming a thing, where you did have 3 companies, and maybe from there, who knows how that shakes out. But something is going to have to give. After a while, am I subscribing to 17 different things? And how is that not just what cable was, where I just had 400 channels?
Right.
How we get from there to that, I don't know what the middle looks like, but we are nowhere near the end of this story. That is for sure.
What about the podcast bubble? Since you were one of the earliest podcasters on the 404,
yes.
Could you have ever imagined being at this current place where, Spotify's forking over millions of dollars for this thing that you've been doing forever, or that people really want this?
Well, that was always the fantasy when we were doing it. It was oh, this seems like this will take over everything, and we were very close to the fire, but I think when we were doing that show, we thought that there was money to be made here, and there is. I think a lot of companies struggled with figuring out ways to monetize it in the beginning. That doesn't seem to be that much of an issue anymore. I think some, companies are vastly overpaying for some of these podcast networks, of course.
Yeah, I mean, Bill Simmons, who I love. I really
like the rewatchables.
I love the rewatchables.
Yeah,
I pitched myself to do Trading Places with them, but
oh my gosh,
it's not so smart.
Oh my gosh,
never heard back.
Valentine.
Yeah. So Mortimer, so
it's the best.
Bacon, as in a bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwich.
And he just looks at the camera.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Anyway, that is a big number. We don't know what the real number is, but, it was somewhere between 50 and 200.
Yeah.
So let's say it was 125.
Right.
That's unbelievable.
It's wild. And everyone talks about a podcast bubble, and sure, but again, there is a massive consolidation going on with that stuff too. And I don't see that stopping anytime soon, because there are so many podcasts that still continue to make lots of money. I think there's been a bit of from an advertising standpoint, there's been a bit of a regression with the amount of spending. And, I think there was a bit of a honeymoon period with that when you had companies like Midroll who really kind of cornered the market in show advertising. But there are new companies out there figuring out ways to track podcast listening a lot more accurately and effectively. The thing with podcasts that I still think is an underappreciated detail of why they're so lucrative and why they're so important is, you have such a direct to consumer thing there. Like, I subscribe to Jill's show because I know exactly what I'm getting. I want this, and I want it regularly, and I want it because I know I'm going to love it, and I know what I am getting. Different subscription relationships are not as precise, and they're not as keyed into exactly what you're, like, there are podcasts that just don't have huge listenerships, but they have such a specific base and such a loyal following that they are niche enough to have money being made there. You look at like a YouTube channel, right, that could have 5 million subscribers, but people who subscribe to it, they don't know exactly what they're going to get. Unless it's like one personality. If it's like a media company, well, you're kind of getting this like potpourri of stuff. You're spinning the wheel, and maybe, 1 out of 10 videos I'm really going to like. But with a podcast, that goes right into your brain. And that is exactly what you want to hear. And, you form these relationships with hosts and content.
And you have a halo relationship that the host is going to be reading your spot, right, and that's going to be interesting.
It's a two-way street.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, last topic. How big of an industry is video gaming right now?
It's pretty friggin' huge.
What's going on in gaming that's exciting right now for you?
What's really cool is we are at the precipice of a new console generation. This generation is not going to look like the others. There are different strategies being implemented by different console makers. So you have Sony, that seems to be very much staying the course in releasing a brand new console, and they're going to leverage their exclusivity. So they, for the last generation of consoles, had the best exclusive games. If you wanted to play the vast majority of original, unique, and exclusive to one console games, that was on the PlayStation 4. And they're kind of riding that momentum into PlayStation 5, which is going to be coming out this holiday season. That is their strategy right now. Then you have Microsoft, who will be coming out with, I think they're calling it Xbox Series X, which is taking a bit of a bend on that philosophy. And they kind of don't care where you play their games, because don't forget, Microsoft is Windows. Mm-hmm. And people who play games on PC, 99.9% of those people are playing games on a Windows PC. So their strategy is, hey, if you don't want to buy an Xbox, that's fine. You can play our games on your PC. Or maybe you don't want the latest and greatest console. Well, we're going to release something that isn't the super high-end version of this console. Maybe it's like a mid-range one, but you'll still be able to play the games, maybe with not the fidelity of our Lamborghini model. But if I can get you into this Toyota Corolla,
why not?
Why not? And that's their strategy. And that seems to have more momentum in terms of people saying, hey, like, maybe that's the move. Maybe it's not just here's one console, buy it and play the games. Then you also have the notion of streaming gaming, which Google tried to do with a service called Stadia, which is kind of dead on arrival.
Oh, wow.
But I think their technology is good, and I think Sony and Microsoft see value there, and you will see those two companies also implement their cloud-based gaming sort of stuff. So it's a really interesting time. We haven't even touched on esports, which is such a massive thing that nobody really understands the popularity of it, especially in this country. Like we are so behind in that.
Really?
Oh yeah.
So who's the leader in that?
Probably South Korea.
And what is esports exactly? Be precise.
Competitive video games. Team-based.
Okay. Yeah.
Solo.
That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, big money.
This is a great time to be getting involved in that, since you will not be able to go to a live sporting event with the spread of coronavirus.
Well, it's funny you say that. Well, it's not funny you say that, but there are stadiums for esports. People go, tens of thousands of people to stadiums to watch people play, League of Legends and Dota and all these games.
Remember when I had to ask you what video game to buy my nephew?
Yes.
Because I had no idea.
Yeah,
and then you told me once, like, you can't buy him that. That's dirty, or that's too violent, or that's that.
There's a lot of junk out there, yeah.
I just remind you again that really the only video game that I played as an adult was Leisure Suit Larry.
That says a lot.
You know what I'm saying?
That says a lot
about... It was like
1987.
Okay. That's when we were playing. Maybe 88.
I don't know if I'd go around like advertising that.
Leisure Suit Larry and the Lounge Lizards, I believe that's what it was called.
Well, it was 1987 in video games. How much were you really getting out of that?
And I was on Wall Street, and there was not a lot going on in like high-mindedness, believe me.
Yeah.
Well, thanks to Jeff, and we'll put a link up to Jeff's bio page at CNET. And by the way, since we actually recorded this, CNET has been sold to Red Ventures. So I haven't talked to Jeff since that sale has taken place. I got to make sure he still has a job. If you have questions about your job, if you've got questions about your financial life, you can always send us an email, askjill@jillonmoney.com. It's Sunday. That might mean you're hanging out with your pals. If so, be sure to stay outside, wash your hands, wear your masks, maintain that physical distancing, and try to do something nice for somebody else today. It will make you feel better. Okay, we'll talk to you tomorrow.